Hello. Welcome to the 13th episode of the Witching Hours. Can you believe it? We've been doing this for almost a whole year, you guys. Welcome in. We have what shall be definitely, no question, hands down, an entertaining episode this evening. As we have a very special guest, the Environomicon, aka V, who's going to be here talking to us about a whole variety of things, I'm sure. But the main thing will be a little something called narcissism. So welcome.
Yeah. So good to see everybody. How's everybody doing? It's Thursday. We have made it to we made it to towards the end and work our way into the weekend for all of us week workers, and for all the weekend workers, I apologize.
Yeah.
But we have to find our joy somewhere. Yeah, so we have an interesting show tonight as we go into the spookiness of October, as we head that way. You ready to get into some paranormal weird witching hour news?
Yes, do it.
All right. So the first story tonight is NASA's DART spacecraft. I think we talked about that when they launched that in a previous episode, and it has done its test. So the DART spacecraft successfully slammed into an asteroid in historic test of planetary defense.
Only humans would test something by exploding something into something else.
That's exactly what they're trying to do. So data from the test will not only demonstrate whether the idea works, but also help NASA understand how it could be applied in the future. So this was an attempt to try to move an asteroid in case one was going to be coming towards the Earth.
Blow it up.
So we could, well, not blow it up, but like push it. Change its
push
trajectory.
It away. Okay. If you say
as a comic smash-up watched around the world, a NASA spacecraft intentionally slammed into an asteroid Monday in a historic test of humanity's ability to protect Earth from a potentially catastrophic collision with a space rock. The agency's DART probe, short for Double Asteroid Redirection Test, carried out the first of its kind maneuver on a small and harmless space rock known as Dimorphos, which is about 6.8 million miles from Earth.
Poor rock.
The $325 million dollar mission was designed to see whether nudging an asteroid can alter its trajectory, providing scientists with a valuable real-world test of planetary defense technologies.
Did we accidentally nudge it to hit us now?
Yeah, we'll see, because they're still calculating what this is, but it was far enough that they felt like they could do this test safely. So the DART spacecraft is about the size of a vending machine, and the asteroid it hit was about the size of a football stadium.
Wow.
So a little probe compared to the side of the asteroid. Cheers erupted at NASA when they did this. And so it looks like they think that they were able to change the rock's trajectory, and that we can possibly try to use this technology to avoid any possible asteroid collision with Earth, which, I don't know, I guess is kind of important considering we know that those happen every so often.
Woohoo.
Yeah. We'll see if we can do it, that we don't make things worse, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Second story tonight is Spanish Stonehenge emerges from drought-hit dam.
What?
So this is Spain. This is from a little while back, but a brutal, during the summer, they had a brutal drought in Spain and in rural Spain. And one of the unexpected side effects of the country's worst drought in decades has delighted archaeologists. The emergence of a prehistoric stone circle in a dam whose waterline has receded, officially known as the Dolmen of Guadaparal, but dubbed the Spanish Stonehenge. The circle of dozens of megalithic stones is believed to date back to 5000 BC.
Wow.
It currently sits fully exposed in one corner of the Valdecinas Reservoir in the central province of Caceres, where authorities say the water level has dropped to 28% of its capacity. They did know that it exists. It was discovered in 1926 but then the area was flooded in 1963 and under Francisco Franco's dictatorship. And it hasn't, been able to be studied then. And considering we've had the emergence of modern archaeology since then, that's quite a... So another Stonehenge, 5,000 BC.
Looking at some pictures of it, it's pretty intricate.
Yeah, and I can link all these stories.
A lot of stones.
Oh, yeah. I saw something about that recently.
Yeah.
Pretty
and we have... Lastly, the last story for tonight is spirit mirror used by 16th century occultist John Dee came from the Aztec Empire. So Dee, whom Elizabeth called my philosopher, Queen Elizabeth called my philosopher, used the mirror in attempts to talk to ghosts. The 16th century courtier, John Dee, a scientific advisor to England's Queen Elizabeth I, was also involved in magic and the occult, and he tried to commune with ghosts using a so-called spirit mirror made of polished obsidian.
That he stole from who? Who did he steal it from?
Now, well, we're about to find out. Now, a new analysis of Dee's infamous mirror has finally traced its origins, not to the spirit world, but to the Aztec Empire. Obsidian mirrors such as Dee's were known from Aztec culture, but there were no records on his mirror's origins. However, geochemical analysis enabled researchers to link the mirror's obsidian, a type of volcanic glass, to Pachuca, Mexico, a popular source of obsidian for Aztec people. This finding indicated that the artifact was Aztec and not a copy made from European obsidian, and Dee likely acquired the mirror after it was brought to Europe from Mexico, according to a new study.
Some Spanish guy stole it.
It was mine.
Yeah. Though Dee was a scientist and mathematician,
all the time.
His interest also swung towards the magical and mystical. In addition to the spirit mirror, he owned other objects related to astrology, divination, alchemy, and the exploration of demonic magic. Scientists reported October 7th in the journal Antiquity. Some other interesting things just at the end of this article. Dee claimed that one of these objects, a purple crystal in a chain, was given to him by Archangel Uriel, along with the instructions for making a philosopher's stone.
Again, it was me. I gave it that. I don't know where these stories are coming from, but
And this
ancient swap creature, you.
This mirror is currently in where a lot of other stolen things are in the British Museum in London.
Oh yeah, that place.
It's polished on both sides and near perfectly circular, measuring 7.2 inches in diameter. And it weighs about 31 ounces. And it sits on a perforated square table.
Wonder if any Aztecs spirits were
Aztec ghosts in it?
haunting him because they, Anyway, who's our guest tonight, Frosty?
All right, yeah, so let's do this. All right, so the Environomicon is a term coined by Thomas Sheridan, a prolific occultist, polymath, and social commentator. Tonight, we will call our guest V. The subject matter V discusses is a culmination of his experiences, experiments, inquiries, studies, and perspectives, and those of many others. A lot of this is based on his life experience, but using a variety of concepts to explore and have fun with it. V does not claim to be an institutionally accredited personage, to be diagnosing or prescribing anything. He is more like a reporter, gonzo journalism for the metaphysicians and whatnot. It would be ill-advised to go around accusing any of your exes after the show of performing zombie black magic, but that is what we will discuss tonight. You can find the Environomicon on YouTube.
I just put the link in the chat there, so go give him a follow.
And so the Witching Hours tonight would like to welcome to the show V. Welcome to the Witching Hours, V.
Welcome.
How you doing? Good evening.
All right. So I guess we should start at the simplest place to start, which is going to be the beginning. Start
at the beginning. When you get to the end, stop.
Oh.
Yeah.
Usually start at the end, like a Quentin Tarantino.
There you go. That's true.
No.
So what was kind of, getting into the creation of your channel and what you're discussing there, how would you explain that?
I've been wanting to I kind of planned for quite some time to start some kind of fireside chats or something to that effect, and I eventually just kind of started doing it. But well, then there was all this experience with the dubious narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very convoluted topic, and I've had a lot of experience with this sort of thing. That tends to happen when you have a family of origin situation with that. But it really kind of hit an apex with a certain significant other, and it was very difficult to deal with. And when she pulled something akin to an interpersonal conspiracy right down the road from me, that's when I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to start talking about these things as well. And it has culminated into a bunch of oddities, and occasionally Batman stops by the office in the videos, and we have a bunch of weird things on the channel. It's kind of all over the place, but somehow all interconnected.
Well, you're in the right place, because this is Team Weird.
Yeah. So I guess when I started first listening to your videos, kind of checking out the old YouTube there, was the discussion about narcissists and narcissism. And kind of from my ignorance, I had to do a little research to figure out, kind of through your videos and other places, to kind of figure out what exactly was being discussed, because the term narcissist for me only meant like someone, I kind of knew the term narcissist like of someone who was like vain, or
right.
That was kind of my definition of it. So would you like to go, because I know that's a lot of what we're going to discuss to a certain extent. Do you kind of want to explain the type of narcissism you're talking about?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the big issue with it. It's unless it's somebody who's really been through it, the term narcissism is so misleading. This is probably the worst analogy, but much like the childlike empress, a never-ending story, the narcissist needs a new name. Because essentially what's really happening there is highly sociopathic behavior. Narcissism, it makes sense in a detailed kind of way, but again, it's a very misleading term, because like you said, you think somebody's just full of themselves. If only. Well, the term comes from Narcissus, the myth of Narcissus, who fell in love essentially with his own reflection. And upon, not himself, mind you, fell in love with his own reflection at the expense of his body, his life, and that of everything else around him, until he finally withered away and nothing was left but the gold and white flower. I don't know, I suppose it's some, I don't know much about plants. It's probably some plant called the narcissus plants or something. And this is where this is the involvement of the myth. Yeah, there we go. So in that way, yes, but their behaviors are so profoundly Machiavellian. It defies conventional wisdom and understanding in so many ways, and it's one of the hardest things to wrap your head around. And it's not at all obvious. This is one of the reasons I like to playfully use the term zombie to describe them, because in my experience, a zombie is kind of what's going on at their core. It's just a mindless eating and killing machine, either metaphorically speaking or literally in some cases. But they are hell-bent on kind of killing you from the inside out slowly over time, whilst distracting you with the veneer of niceties and the facade of humanity even. And of course, there will be outbursts and insane behaviors here and there, and then they'll run interference to clean that up. And they prod you for so much information. They basically learn how to just completely screw with your nervous system and emotions. And they spend about 2 to 3 months really getting to know you. And in this time period, they are pretending to be like your soulmate. Basically, they have this amorphous nature to their construct, and their construct is it's a false persona. The true self of the narcissist is locked somewhere deep within. Kind of like a lot of vampire analogies are used too, but it's in like, they have no reflection. They have no. The one thing they fear the most is a self-awareness.
So linguist in the chat was saying you mean manipulation, right?
What did I say? Yes,
Like,
very
yeah, like talking about how they're trying to like get their hooks in you.
Oh yeah,
they're by manipulation, really, is what's going on.
Yeah, instinctively,
Mm-hmm.
instinctively motive. It's if you really want to get down to it, I'd call it an aberration of instincts. There's nothing natural about this kind of disorder because they're essentially living in a state of pain, suffering, and misery themselves. Therefore, it's not in alignment with the rest of their underlying psychobiology. And you have the true self locked away somewhere, kind of like Dorian Gray. He can't look at his painting, or else he withers away. And this is much like the narcissist. If they see their true selves, they can go into narcissistic collapse, whereas their construct fades away dramatically and violently. They can even risk psychosis when this happens. So you really have an absolute nightmare of someone to deal with, and they embed themselves in you and create this artificial codependency. And it's some of the people who have are the most insightful are diagnosed narcissists, and there's not many that talk about this, but those that do, my goodness, it's very insightful. One is Professor. I can't remember his name at the moment, but he likened narcissism to a virus. It doesn't matter what your defenses are; you just can't be exposed to them, or because if you're a target, they're going to get their hooks in you. And the only defense against the dark arts is no contact. You just can't have anything to do with them.
The Purple Throne said that's their ex. They learned everything about me to use it against me.
Exactly. They have they have no confidence. They have no true confidence. They're very cocky. They're very arrogant about their artificial constructs. They're very effective about what they do. And they seem to think that they're somehow superior for this, and it's like, well, that's just another ridiculous contradiction in and of itself. Because essentially, you have a radically underdeveloped person, and it's like this is not something to be proud of, and they're not. The true self is not proud of this at all. They sit atop of an ocean of shame, which instead of learning how to confront and process, they just suppress it at any and all costs to them and anyone else around them.
So I was just thinking about the symbolism of the story of Narcissus and how much it really like goes even deeper, because he was so beautiful on the outside to himself that he probably, I mean, I don't know if it goes into that in the story because it's kind of just him and himself in the water. But if he was that beautiful of a person on the outside, he could have very easily been charismatic enough to be manipulative to other people as well. And then what's really inside of him is something completely different.
Yeah. And that's one thing that's left out for the myth that doesn't fit into the whole spectrum and kind of diagnoses there is the it wouldn't be so bad if it was just somebody obsessed with their image or anything like this. Own detriment. It's everybody and everything else that they drag into this. Yeah. And they need
the
it
facade of it being something that it is absolutely not.
Yeah, and it's so unnatural. What they can't self-sustain, and what they need is what's referred to clinically as narcissistic supply, which is attention and validation. But if they get depleted enough, any press is good press, and it can be scorn, whatever. They prefer unconditional adulation, but that doesn't tend to last too long once they get going with the crazy making behaviors and whatnot. So
Linguist was asking if you notice any manic episodes.
Sometimes, yeah. And it depends. There's a lot of different kinds. I like to think of it as it's all the same beast, just different expressions of the animal. You can have this kind of underlying construct, need for fuel, narcissistic supply. There's a guy who refers to himself as the ultra narcissist. Think of him as the devil himself. He goes by HG Tutor. He's on YouTube, and he gives very insightful information about this. But he says the term fuel as opposed to supply. And as he will say, fuel is the lifeblood of the narcissist. And they will extract it from anyone and everyone they can, especially the significant other. That is a primary target, and if they have children, oof, then that's a problem. That's a big problem for the children.
So, kind of going into the origins of this a little bit more, in your research on this, have we determined whether this is like a natural phenomena? Is this learned behavior? Is this,
chemical
does this come from an
imbalance,
abusive background?
brain problems?
Do we know?
Prevailing ideas are it's trauma related. It's now when it comes to sociopaths, like actual psychopaths and sociopaths, which are rare. It's usually people who are either borderline, which would be borderline personality disorder, or narcissistic personality disorder, or some comorbidity. There's a ton of those. But that's almost always due to developmental traumas. So complex trauma, CPTSD, and not everybody that experiences complex trauma will develop narcissism. Far from it. A different end of that spectrum is to develop an inordinately high degree of empathy. One, which is nothing at all like the narcissist, because they are almost devoid of empathy, if not entirely. So yeah, that would be the origin. And a follow-up question to that is it treatable? Yes, it is. But the problem is that is the least likely person to ever enter any kind of treatment or therapy. And if they do, there's the high likelihood that they're going to turn the therapy into another theater for the narcissism, which is not going to help anything. And it's just going to continuously fuck things up. So, sorry, I don't know if it's... Sorry if it's...
It's fine. It's fine.
Sorry if I say bad words. That doesn't happen.
You're an ancient swamp creature. You can cuss if you want to.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good. I can relax the robes a little bit.
So, and I know we have people still coming in. So if you're just jumping in, you're trying to figure out what the heck we're talking about. We have entered our spooky October shows, and so I don't know if it gets any more scary than this tonight, which is the things we do know. the people that are real, the zombies, as V would say, that are real flesh and blood,
real zombies,
that can wreak havoc upon you, which it sounds like some people in our chat tonight have had experience with. And so I guess that would be the next thing, is how much of abundance do we have narcissists around us? Like, is this something that most people have to deal with in their life? Are we talking about 1% of the population, or?
A lot of people, there's a lot that are involved to some degree or another with some, and they just don't know. Some are in denial if they're very involved. But as far as, by some estimations these days, it is as many as 1 in 6. That has some degree or another of a cluster B personality disorder, to the point where it's a problem. I mean, a big problem. Now, as with some estimations, there are others that are a lot more conservative, and I'm just not sure which ones to really rely upon. It's probably somewhere in between. Yeah, some have been very small. And here's the problem with the ones from about 20 years ago. It would say something like, oh, it's 2 to 3% of the population. Well, the big problem with cluster B personality disorders is they're not available for sampling. They're not available for getting what's the term? Any kind of consensus data, because they're not revealing these things about themselves.
Yeah, and they wouldn't. I don't think that they would necessarily tell the truth, even if they were questioned
for the most part,
or surveyed or whatever.
Yeah, for the most part, no. And the other thing is, it's rare when they're even self-aware of it, because in many cases, the way that the pathology operates is such a distortion of reality that they believe anything about themselves that's favorable, and so they will be completely unaware that they even have anything wrong with it. No, it's not them. It's the world. The world is the problem. I am the martyr, the humanitarian. Never mind that I have no concern for anyone else other than myself. You see, this is of little consequence, and all that sort of thing. It's it's really something. It's an enigma, and it's so labyrinthian to get wrapped up in. And this is one of the things that happens if you really go through it. It's part of the coping mechanism is to learn so much about it as a way of unscrambling your own brain and emotions and feelings and everything else. And also at some level trying to help this person too, which is futile. If any rescue operation is to be had, they need to be the ones leading that, and they're the least likely to do it. The only time it can never happen is if they hit some kind of rock bottom that is just so unfathomable to most people that it's strong enough to kind of shake the foundation of their kind of decision on some level to be completely numb from the brain down. And that can do it. But even then, one of the things I try to communicate in the videos is that kind of futility, because it's hard to accept that, because you will care very much about these people in spite of what they do to you and everyone else. If you get connected with them, and it's hard to have to cut someone off. It's unnatural to have to cut someone off like that. But it's the only.
Purple Throne was wondering if you had any insight into why such a large majority of the population is so damaged. Why are 1 in 6 having these issues?
Yeah, I have a very unconventional thought about that. But
well, this is the forum for the unconventional.
All right,
tell us. What are you waiting for, man?
In accordance with the agency, we are all in agreement about this to some degree or another. It appears that some kind of catastrophe did happen long ago, much like many of the stories of old tell about some kind of dubious flood or something to that effect. There's a good fair amount of evidence to suggest this, too. If anybody wants to check out Randall Carlson, he's a geologist and presents some very compelling information for this sort of thing. And I do believe there is some kind of, I don't know if it's reached the level of theory yet, but at the bare minimum, it's a hefty hypothesis that seems maybe some comet hit the polar ice caps and rapidly melted them.
Yeah,
that's
something that
the Earth.
That's something that gets brought up by Graham Hancock a lot too.
That's right. He and Randall like to team up on shows. Anyway, I bring that up because, and from my perspective, it's almost as if humanity has been reeling from some kind of collectivized post-traumatic stress disorder or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It shows up in our ideologies that are completely in discord to our healthy psychobiology and developmental genomic expressions and all this. And it's like, well, why would we have developed that way? It seems more to me as if we had a major setback. And as Graham Hancock puts it, a species with amnesia. And there's so many kinds of dysfunctional systems and dysfunctional bad advice about how to do things. You almost have to become some kind of explorer just to disentangle from all of that crap within society as well. And thankfully, the roadmaps and everything else are available. That's another thing I try to do on the show is point to some resources. But we all also have to be explorers as well, because so much innovation is needed, and so many things. There's damn well near everything. Nobody knows enough about everything. Far from it.
And you were just talking about the reluctance of people with these traits, with this mental issue, this mental health issue, like not wanting to come forward because of the traits of narcissism. But to be honest with you, I mean, I think that could be very much the case. But I don't think anyone typically with mental health issues is necessarily aware that they have those issues. Like I've gone through bouts of, depression before. I think a lot of people have, not that they're, that it's crazy, but, a lot of people face these issues from time to time. But if you would have asked me during one of those states, like, hey man, are you like clinically depressed? I'd have been like, no, man, I'm just, like I wouldn't have identified with that. And I didn't identify with it till later. And I go, you know what? I think I was depressed then for like 6 months, In that case,
and yeah, there's a lot of things that sit like that seem relatable. I like to use the term, in this case, we're comparing apples to arsenic though. In this case, it's, you just didn't know But when it comes to somebody with narcissism, there's a pathological denial. It's a need, and it's a defense mechanism because they need to live in a delusional fantasy to keep the false sense going. Now, their delusional fantasy will seem very realistic on the outside. That's what the construct is all about. And some of them have the audacity to consider themselves realists too, which is really something. That's denialism on a whole new level. And I've known a few that are self-aware, know what they are to some degree or another, and still think of themselves as some kind of logicians or realists. Now, they can be. This isn't to denigrate their intelligence or anything like that. So many of them can be very intelligent, but it is within a very narrow bandwidth of perspective, because so much of their energy and their natural resources within themselves are being diverted into this very necrotic and entropic system that needs to, well, feed upon the blood of the living in order to sustain itself.
So Priestess of Wonderland,
the zombies.
Priestess of Wonderland had a question. How would someone know if they were a narcissist?
That's a good question.
Is there an answer for that one?
You kind of. If there's any concern that one might be, well, for one, that's usually an indication that you're not. If you're willing to,
if you're worried about
consider these things, yeah, which many of us do, especially those of us who get embroiled with them. This is a big part of it, because we get, especially empathic people, we soak in their crap and then begin to believe, oh God, what if I'm the narcissist? Well, then here's the thing: if you start doing things about that, that's a pretty clear indication that you're most likely not. Almost certainly not. Their defense mechanisms are just, it's been so difficult for me to try to understand. And there's so much of it that I understand it in a sense, but it's hard to really wrap my head around how anybody can be so, like, proudly insane. There's one specialist I know of who refers in a discussion, she was like, it's like you're dealing with a high functioning lunatic. I mean, really. It's like a haunted house of a person that's somehow wrapped up in this dysfunctional homeostasis that makes this thing look real and human, but when you get down to it, it's not, and it's monstrous. Unfortunately, that's the problem. It's really, you have somebody who's hell bent on controlling you coercively in a way to break you down, so they can kind of use you as some kind of macabre marionette. And it's also because they're pathologically jealous and envious of sometimes of the dumbest things too, like the way you walk or something could make them feel some way about themselves. And so then they have to interject and implant some kind of subtle knife and usually walk different or something like that. And it's this very sleight of hand kind of stuff, and you really have to be very kind of detective-y in putting the pieces together and clues together to kind of discern all this shit. It's very criminal, basically, in so many ways.
What some of the stuff
crimes against humanity in the sense that it is crimes against that which is humane. I mean, egregious crimes against that which is humane.
One of the things that you were just talking about, kind of brought up, you've had lots of situations with like, abusive relationships where the person tries to isolate people, to remove them from their family, to remove them from their friends. Is that kind of also kind of the MO of someone with narcissism?
I think I missed the first part of your question there. My volume cut out for a minute. What was the first part of that?
So just saying, like, I've heard and, had experiences with people who have had like abusive relationships where the person they were with tried to isolate them, like from friends and family. Is that also something we have going on here?
Big time. It's one of the other unique things about this is they all seem to have the same playbook. And yeah, the isolation will absolutely be a part of it. And what's strange is they have this, it's so convoluted and so precise, this kind of destructive, egregiously, poorly, negatively controlling kind of modus operandi, and yet they all have it. It's so alien to, functioning, people, for anywhere from average to extraordinary. And anything in between. But that's what's so remarkable to me, is like it's this thing that's just so complex, and yet it's unconscious. They don't plan it. It's an instinct, or it's an aberration of instincts. But yeah, no, that is a part of it. The isolation is always needed. They they need to keep somebody isolated because they're easier to control that way.
Yeah.
Medium Janelle, do we want to kind of go back to chat? I know there's been a lot of talk here. We want to make sure we get all the questions.
Sounds like Purple Throne has had her fair share of having to deal with a narcissist in lots of terrible ways, just like V is talking about. Terrible, horrible, inhumane ways. And then people were talking about trying to figure out if you are a narcissist, kind of going along the same information there about the more you look into it, the more you realize that you couldn't be one because you're worried about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other plus side of it is, there's a silver lining, and if one is in a position where they have to learn more about this stuff, you're going to end up finding out a lot more things that are actually beneficial to you as well, because it's and kind of part of the healing, you'll have to what I refer to as disentangling with these kinds of people. And what I mean by that is disentangling empathically, emotionally, psychologically, psychobiologically. And the way to do that, one of many ways, is to do things like, become trauma informed. What were your developmental traumas? And we've all got something, even in ideal situations. And I would kind of harken that back to species with amnesia thing. And even if that's not true, I think it's a useful fiction, at the very least, to kind of explain. We all seem to have some kind of feeling that, as Steve Tyler said in the Aerosmith song, there's something wrong with the world today. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
Something's wrong with their eyes, right?
Yeah. And I think.
Are we going to break out into song now?
Yeah.
I was about to.
We'll get a duet going. I can get some ribbons and stuff to put on my mic stand here. We can get it going. Yeah, well, I was going to bring up, as Jenny just said, they were talking about all of a sudden kind of like psychoanalyzing yourself when you hear about this thing, like, am I a narcissist? Like, I did that myself when I listened to your first couple of videos. I was like, I might even talk to you about it, but I was like, I'm a Gemini. I have those Gemini traits. I can be a bit manipulative, but like, I think I usually try to do it in a good way. I'm good at like getting people from, navigating issues and trying to get everyone to play nice and stuff like that.
Right.
And I was like, man, am I doing this and I'm not aware of it? But I guess, like you said, even if you're thinking about that, it kind of shows that you're not. And
I mean, I thought I was like that too. I thought there was something wrong with it. I mean, in my case, I was raised amongst folks like this, and so when that happens, you tend to. This is what's another thing that's so fascinating about the way the unconscious works. You'll just automatically, until or unless you become aware of these things and do like the family of origin work, the great work, the healing work, and that sort of thing, and make the unconscious conscious, so it is no longer fate. Essentially, that would be kind of hearkening to a Carl Jung quote. But you'll keep repeating these patterns. You'll end up with similar people. And it got to the point, and I had interacted with a lot of people because of work and everything else that I've been involved with. I've had an unconventional life. And it got to the point where it's just like, I guess this is how the world is. I'm the one with the problem. What is my problem? I'm not evil enough. That's the problem. I guess I'm in a state of arrested development where I never became evil enough. And that's... And actually, it took some, kind of next level egregious narcissism debacles to really wake me up to because I almost had this apologist kind of worldview that somehow, as like a coping mechanism, kind of validated and vindicated people like this. But it was because I still just did not. I understood it pretty well, but not anywhere near enough. And wouldn't you know it, once you do the family of origin stuff, those patterns start breaking up, and other folks that are more in line with how you are start connecting. And it's not like I never interacted with people who were like that. It's just obviously I know you guys. It's just the vast majority for me, the cyclical patterns, for example, just were very predominantly populated with cluster B types.
You know, you brought up an interesting point there about not being evil enough. Linguist said, "I'm not evil enough. What a problem to have." Yeah, but you know, I think for people who get into these kinds of things, like you and I, and probably many people in chat, there's been maybe explorations with the left-handed path, so to speak. And I think you bring up a good point in that a lot of times I don't think those things are explored because of malice or because of bad intent, but they're explored because you feel like you have to have the ammunition you need to fight a world that is that way.
Well, then
do you know what I mean?
Shadow. Yeah, I mean, we've all got the shadow, and the shadow is a Jungian concept that's a number of things, but in this context, it's the darker aspects. Now, when they run rogue, disconnected from the rest of the the psychobiological system, the rest of the genomic expression, yeah, they can wreak all kinds of havoc in the background. But when they're integrated, when they're understood, my goodness, they can become something else entirely. And yeah, they can be kind of tooth and claw, but when integrated with the rest of the system, you just have something else entirely. And I think this is one of the many things that this is the kind of the language of the unconscious. It's like, hey, check out this left half path shit. I think this is one of the things we've been divorced from the language of the unconscious, which is this profoundly rich and incomprehensibly intelligent thing that we all have. And it does have this language, and it speaks in symbols, it speaks in patterns, it speaks in concepts, feelings. And, it seems as if we had this understanding in language long ago. I can't help but look at things like hieroglyphs and go, yes, mimetic communication. There's so much dense information in a meme as compared to a few words, because essentially a meme is a combination of concepts, images, and words. You get this dense packet, and this is kind of how they communicated long ago. I think we might have known this instinctively, and this was one of the many things we lost, was this understanding. And thankfully, there's clinical folks out there who have fleshed this stuff out beautifully. That would be the Young to Live By team, and they've put their library together on YouTube, and it validates a lot of mysticism as well, because there's simply layers of the psyche, the psychobiology, where that's just how things are. That they're very profoundly mystical, and that's part of the whole homeostasis thing.
Yeah, you hit on a whole other thing I was thinking about earlier too, which is just something that's kind of been on my radar recently as I've gotten into more shamanistic spiritualism and a return to human roots and stuff like that, so to speak. Talking about an acceleration of maybe mental health issues.
Yeah.
And I've seen some, ponder about the aspect of spiritually, have we lost that connection with ourselves, with our shamanistic roots? And definitely I'm not one to preach because I'm a huge tech guy. I like my AC and my air conditioning, but have we lost the connection with what we really are and what we were meant to be? And as when you were talking about a little bit about that a second ago. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I would say we have. I don't think it's lost because we all have it.
Yeah.
And thankfully nowadays for very long times out there, this kind of knowledge has been obfuscated and occulted. And I understand, for a long time that was necessary to preserve it. And, and things like the so-called mystery schools and things like that. And, only real kind of snippets about these things ever made it into books that you can buy and shit like this. But, one of the many things is this, the kind of the whole language of the unconscious thing. And Carl Jung and some other rogue interloper types. Sorry about the trains. trains, planes, everything like this out here. Yeah, luckily it's accessible now in ways that even if you're more materialistically minded can approach. That's one of the things I love about the more clinical application. And the way that they utilize this is dealing with mental disorders, things like this. They can take things that are just incurable, as this story goes, and bullshit. That's a walk in the park. So something like depression or anxiety, with the kind of therapeutic modality that they have specifically. Yeah, it's a walk in the park, and these things develop because, well, we're living by systems and input that is anathema to our underlying systems, which turn out to be profoundly intelligent, and that in ways that it's difficult to describe. And the best thing about it is you don't need to take anybody's word for it. You just try it and see how it goes. And the proof is in the pudding. It's the results. And I like to say, despite universal similarities, there's no one-size-fits-all approach with anything. However, I think it's pretty important to know the universal similarities, and for whatever reason, those seem to have been lost for a long time, but wouldn't you know it? And thankfully, they've been kind of making a comeback on the periphery of awareness there. So
I think it's coming back in full force.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. We've talked about this a little bit in Discord, but I imagine you might know who they are. The band Hyalong.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've and like they're just taking off around the world, and like you have like these other you have cultures all around the world that are identifying with them as like their ancient shamanistic ritual.
Activate an ancestral memory kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just by seeing somebody do this. Yeah.
Yeah. And and I it just sitting back and observing, it seems like there's been recently, and I don't know if that is partly due to shutdowns and COVID and staying at home and people educating themselves or what it comes from, but it seems like there definitely has been a bit of a spiritualistic movement over the last few years.
I think COVID did kind of force that. That's one of the silver linings. It forced the hermit kind of thing, like in the tarot story. It forced people to kind of deal with
get quiet,
distract themselves for dealing with their problems anymore. They just had to sit with themselves at home.
They had to be quiet and actually listen to themselves, and
and
they had time to do that too. That's another big thing, is that we've been forced to not have time to do anything to better ourselves for so long, and then we were forced to actually sit and have the time to do that, and look what happened.
Yeah,
some good shit came out of it.
Exactly. A lot of innovations had to happen too, and from across the board, from the microcosm to the macro, like things like, well, we realized just how silly it was to force everybody to just have to drive to some location to do some mundane task on a computer when they could just do it at home, and it saved money and it was more productive, and all kinds of it's forced to do away with all kinds of foolish myths that were just going unchallenged.
Well, that's interesting, V, because I was having a conversation about that today with a colleague. Not to get us off topic here, but talking about that the working from home thing and the free time that could give people, and even accomplish the same amount of work, or even maybe even more work in some cases. With people that I know said they could just get more done because they weren't constantly like tempted to like have an hour conversation about last night's game with their coworker,
Right. And not the anxiety of the supervisor looking over their shoulder. So part of your brain power is being diverted to putting on the show. Instead, it's more put onto the task, and which opens up more bandwidth to, I don't know, get creative. And who knows what else?
Well, the article that my colleague was telling me about today was talking about how there's a, resistance to working from home now. And the article that they were telling me about was stating that there's many, businesses, corporations, et cetera, now that are saying, well, if these workers can work from home, then we should do that, except we should fire all of them and outsource those jobs to other countries where it's cheaper.
Pay them less
shit.
money. Yeah.
So once again, I feel like as the American worker tries to make some kind of traction and some time for themselves where they are able to think and
Be healthier,
ponder and get healthier and understand themselves and their surroundings, there's a lot of resistance to that.
Yeah, I would call it. You see, I like to refer to it in the videos kind of as necrotic systems, because the thing is with the whole narcissism thing, it's not. Unfortunately, it's not just isolated within people. There are ideologies and ways of doing things that are profoundly narcissistic, and in the sense of this dysfunctional. This is the way, coercive control shit, or just fucking people over. It's very dysregulated because when you have a healthy psychobiological system, which comes from the individual and the collective, by extension, the systems that they create and inhabit are spontaneous order and are homogenous. They wouldn't even think of like, oh, let's just try to fuck other people. Let's fuck everybody over.
Yeah.
Let's outsource jobs and have lackluster performances with people that this is just not a good idea to do it for a number of reasons. And it's more beneficial to keep things locally and keep innovating and allow people to do their thing at the same time, because this just enriches everything. And it creates a whole other form of abundance, along with, material abundance as well. So, yeah, it's one of the things that, I'm kind of building up to getting into at some point is to discussing the larger systems. And they, it's anything can be, well, much like narcissism manifesting in a person, it's a perversion of decency. They utilize the veneer of decency and humanity to do abysmal things. And this is how these ideologies, if they metastasize, end up too. But then people go, oh, well, then everything is bad about this ideology. And that you got to do the discernment thing. Let's not throw out the baby with the dirty bath or anything like that. That's I encourage cultivating the inner detective. And
it does seem like if I had to just say it, that our American culture is a very narcissistic culture, though.
Yeah,
from the top down.
Yes, I agree, and I don't think and from my perspective, I don't see anything wrong necessarily with like the underlying ethos, but what's lacking are the regulating functions, the development, the greater development of the psychobiological whole. And I think this can be accomplished by just more people knowing about this kind of thing. That's going to help profoundly, because that'll kind of just start kind of naturally either detoxing otherwise useful systems or at the same time creating some new ones over top of them or parallel to them, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
because you can't fight zombie with zombie, unfortunately. That's on the microcosm and the macro. You can't. I tried for many years trying to quarrel with ideologies and things like this. Well, it's unfortunately it's the same modus operandi under them too. It's fuel. They're after fuel. If it's a narcissistic ideology or force or movement, it's after the same supply. It needs supply, and it's a collectivized thing. Well, there's no point dialoguing with it. But what you can do is disentangle and better oneself and connect with other people doing so. And by extension, you kind of just start developing something better and healthier and more robust. And narcissistic systems don't like this because this takes away from their control, their coercive control. And it is a control that they have no business having, and they're not qualified. They don't understand what they're controlling.
Yeah.
And if they did, they would know that they don't need to be controlling it like this to begin with. And the only reason they do those is because of their own pathological issues, and therefore they need to deal with that in their own time. Stop bothering other people with it. But they're not going to do that, so, we just... You just gotta starve them to death. That's it. That's the defense against the dark arts.
Yeah.
There was a comment from Purple Throne earlier saying that they should teach teens in high school or something how to recognize, some of these some of these mental disorders.
Yeah, they absolutely should. My only concern would be anything like this being taught in any kind of institution, just institutions today. Just because they tend to be a little on that hyper reductionistic, control-y kind of thing. But alternatively, thankfully we do have these other modalities, and the word is spreading. And it's kind of creating almost a parallel society kind of thing, which is integrated with the other one. And
parallel society, I like that.
This is another Thomas Sheridan term. By the way, if anybody's interested in some of that stuff, I would highly recommend his channel. He's a very prolific speaker, a culty fellow. He's very grounded to. He's somebody I started listening to some years back, and it was one of those. This was like an ancestral memory for me. It was somebody who was elucidating things I knew and was acting on, but had no idea to describe. And at the time, it sounded just too crazy for me to talk about. But then there was this guy saying all of these things, and this was very helpful to help to self-actualize. And over time, more and more folks like this showed up, and then I started doing my own thing, and back and forth. And but yeah, he talks quite a bit about the parallel society, and it's not like a defiant fu necessarily, anything like that. It's just you're aware of the narcissism thing because it's a problem, but you also know kind of how to deal with it and learn more about that. And
is it Thomas Sheridan the second?
What's that?
Thomas Sheridan the second. Is that his YouTube name?
I don't think so. Let me look this up. Let me consult the Oracle. I believe. If you just do a Google search, he does not come up. It's some
or Thomas
Irish
Sheridan the first.
He goes by Moss and Stones. If you type in Thomas Sheridan on YouTube, you should be able to find him.
Okay. It's a dude sitting in his car.
No.
Yes, that's him.
That's him. Okay.
A lot of videos from the car these days. And he also has another channel called Beyond Room 313, I think. That one's very cool. It's where he does his little paranormally kind of documentaries. He's got a very Fortean kind of detective-y kind of outlook on the paranormal thing, which I very much vibe with this as well. And he's explored all kinds of very cool things. And wouldn't you know it, there's a fair enough amount of folks out there like this, and this is a very good thing about spreading the word about these unconventional things, which, wouldn't you know it, have quite a bit to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think just putting it out there, talking about it, thinking about it, is like you're injecting it into the collective unconsciousness, and then watch it spread.
Yes.
Then
there's
we will take down this narcissistic shit show and make something better.
I have a bit of an analogy for that situation.
Yeah.
There's an interesting fact about fungi, one of many, but one thing that that's interesting about it is the mycelium kind of construct which grows throughout like a forest, which some of these things can live to like hundreds or thousands of years, even if I think it can be lived that long. And it basically acts as this phenomenal brain system. Mm-hmm. And one thing that it will do, now for one, it's integrated with the forest. It can like supply nutrients to trees and back and forth and things like this. But it also, if a pathogen enters the forest, it picks up on it, sends information all the way to the back, says what's going on, and then the rest of the mycelium starts shooting information everywhere, running little experiments, spreading the word, if you will, and getting it back to where the pathogen is at, and essentially coming up with a cure, or at the very least a defense against the pathogen. And I say this because from where I'm sitting and standing, we have a lot in common with fungi. Mm-hmm. And in this way, I see the internet acting as neural network for mycelium in this context.
Yeah.
And
That's funny, V, because I think we actually did a news story on the Witching Hours about that. An article published in Science about that. And the scientists who are doing the experiment were calling it the Wood Wide Web.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. There you go.
And yeah, and like it works as a way for trees and the plants to communicate with one another.
Yeah.
And they were even saying that in their experiments, they were able to see like if one tree was getting like more water or more nutrients, it could actually shift the supply of the nutrients and things that it was getting to other trees that needed it more.
It's to get a mental image. It's very much like Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
Really is. And the thing is, if one develops their kind of innate psychobiology, learns the language of the unconscious, and starts healing from the intergenerational traumas and everything like this, well, you start getting tapped into more what I'd refer to as the internet of reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something else entirely. You could call it the collective unconscious, or any number of things, but that's really something. And it's if you start experiencing something like that, it's like, oh my God, these are the things that are always described in all these spiritual practices. But now looking back on those descriptions, it's like a lot of those seem kind of dissociative. And it's not, in my experience, actualizing this stuff is not dissociative at all. It's hard to describe.
Mm.
But it's one of those things where, you really just have to kind of be, cultivate the inner detective in so many different ways. I should probably make a video on what I mean by that. I just realized it's a really nuanced concept.
Hey, well, that's a great thing about this. Yeah, instead of just sitting down and recording a video, you got to have conversations and you get ideas.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the first time I've done this since starting to do the video thing. So that's terrific.
Yeah.
So just just to kind of reset, if anyone is coming in and seeing what's going on, we are talking to the Environomicon, who we're calling V this evening. Feel free to check out their YouTube channel, the Environomicon, on YouTube, and there are many fascinating, interesting videos to watch with some animation and kind of a unique kind of a vibe going on there. So I definitely recommend going and checking those out. It seems like a lot of people are already kind of interested in these topics. So definitely go check that out and give him a sub over there and check it out.
Linguist asked if you have a blog.
I don't have a blog. I've kind of been in the shadows for many years.
In the swamp.
Yeah,
in the swamp.
The swampy shadows.
That's where I live. That's where
Okay.
I live in the dirty little cabin in the swamp, but I work for the agency, the Nameless Faceless Agency, and this is a good thing. And we're all finagling around out there and spreading the word and doing weird experiments and things like this. But yeah, no, I got to the point where I was actually going to start interjecting these ideas through entertainment. That was my idea for quite some time, and a studio kind of formulated around this. And I was just interjecting the ideas in entertainment and utilizing useful fictions and things like this to describe things that are. The thing is, and what I've found when you're dealing with things like this, when it's tapping into that innate reality, it just vibes with people. It activates something.
Mm-hmm.
And this sets off some kind of awakening or a memory and things like that. And then they just start finding out things on their own. And again, the beauty of it is that the proof is in the pudding, and you just figure it out as you go along and cultivate the intuition as well. This is another big one.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing we've been encouraged to become divorced from for the longest time, but wouldn't you know it? And the studies come to prove, turns out intuition's kind of a big deal and it's important. Oh God, yeah, what do you know? So there's that.
I mean, all you had to do is look at the animal kingdom to figure that shit out.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, like one thing Terrence McKenna said, and in his day it was even truer. Like, I don't know how somebody like him even self-actualized to the point he was able to. Well, probably a lot of psilocybin helped. Which did, I'm sure it did. But
I was wondering if that was the same McKenna I knew. He was definitely on Art Bell a lot back in the day, talking about the benefits of such substances.
A wonderful man, a brilliant, insightful, wonderful man. But he, in one of his many prolific lectures, he was kind of lamenting. Let me see if I get into Terrence McKenna for him. Let's see if I remember what he said. Like, well, it's almost as if we've become divorced from nature in thinking that we're not a part of it. We're looking at it as if we're some kind of detached observer, as if we don't belong. And we try to control what we don't even understand. And then he goes on to suggest this strange kind of idea he had in a psilocybin state, which was he had this almost kind of vision thing where it was as if kind of a dream and a concept coming together, like as if Gaia, the spirit of the earth or whatever, got to a point where it needed to manifest an avatar for itself to be a better custodian, but also so it could understand itself more. And the idea being that maybe that's kind of what we're meant to be, but we've forgotten who we are. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of important to, in a sense, remember, but I think more like rediscover might be the right thing, because there can be a lot of getting sidetracked by looking a little too much in the past. And
all the information is still there. It's just, really is just rediscovering it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like in my experience, it's things like, it's one way to kind of help cultivate that kind of discernment, a detective thing, is to find things that just kind of activate that organic memory within you and start activating these systems. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses. Sometimes the work can be kind of dark, you know, and especially with trauma work and shit like that, it's just, you know, I'm trying to look for ways that it can be, for one, I don't think it needs to be nearly as troublesome as it has been for so long. I think it has been so troublesome because we just haven't known enough, and we've forgotten too much. And instead of working with these kind of natural cycles, we just kind of oppose them because we don't know what's going on, and that just drags them out and makes it even worse. And
absolutely.
Then, dealing with fucked up systems and God knows what else. But I'm very convinced that that we're not built for handling excessive traumas, and yet we've been through so many. And so this is indicative to me that, something's off kilter there. And it is in need of some cultivating and rediscovery and finagling and innovating.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I noticed a couple of knowing looks there from Medium Jenny Lee. Is there something that you wanted to? I've noticed it a couple times. So if there's something you want to get into as well, I just wanted to open that door there.
Well, I mean, it's just, we come into our lives forgetting on purpose so that we can rediscover and grow and learn. And there absolutely is entirely too much trauma. And I don't think that it's necessary either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the excuses. There always seems to be some kind of dark and obfuscated excuse underlying any kind of abusive action or system. And one of the ones that I've kind of pinpointed for the traumatic abuse is, it forces evolution. It forces mutation, like in the X-Men.
In the spiritual world, people say that trauma triggers us to begin our spiritual path, which it does. Right. But I feel there's got to be other ways.
Yes, I agree. And I think and this is so. It's one of those unusual things to work with because it helps to see things like that to kind of heal the trauma as well, to give it, to kind of invigorate it with purpose. But you just want to be cautious as to not create that into some kind of self-fulfilling prophecy to fuel it and make sure that there's nothing, I don't know, on the periphery of awareness that's trying to finagle its way in there to tap into that as a justification to just kind of fuck you over and feed on you again, essentially.
And I kind of feel like that's another one of your necrotic systems that has been built into humanity, is that we have to go through these traumas in order to have some sort of growth, which I think is complete horseshit.
I do too. I think it is horseshit. The only way I think it's been necessary in the sense that things have just been so fucked up. It's acted as a profound catalyst to force us to try to figure things out. But I think that's only because the supportive structures, the reinforcing systems haven't been there.
Yep.
So, we do the best we can with what we've got, and that's that. But I don't think I really just don't have the sense that it's some kind of essential necessity. I think that there's like some shadow element in there, because usually any kind of bullshit abusive thing finds some kernel of truth to latch onto and then pervert it into something.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be something like, oh, you go through some soft core dark night of the soul. That would be what would happen in a more organic system, and everybody would know about this, and we may even have some kind of ritualistic thing, and it's a thing, and we grow from it instead of this confusing, long-winded, troublesome, very, very quarrelsome process. That's kind of where I'm feeling it at the moment.
Yeah. Linguist said, just think of how many theories there are out there about just everything. And as a collective system of consciousness functioning, get one idea and try to process it with agreements and oppositions to decide what we consider to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost like a group think.
Right. Right. Exactly.
One thing you brought up there too was a conversation that me and Medium Jenny Lee had quite often. There was like some articles and documentaries and stuff we had watched about the benefit to like the sociopath in our American culture of like, if you look at a lot of celebrities, a lot of people who have achieved like the end game, like the goal of like fame and stardom and money and power. Studies are showing that an abundance of these people are actually sociopaths because they're willing to
lie, cheat, steal, and step on everybody to get there,
and to make sacrifice and to sacrifice their relationships to be able to one up the people around them that aren't willing to make those sacrifices.
Again, this isn't necessary. They're the things that, and I've read these things too, and there's a time that I believed this as well, that there was some kind of validity or necessity to the sociopath. I no longer do, and that has come with, for what it's worth, extensive.
That's kind of what I was thinking about. You were talking about when you said you didn't feel like you were evil enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the thing. But the thing is, there's just nothing in them. That's one of the things. They're empty, and the ones that are more self-aware will even admit this. They're like, "Oh, I just feel empty." There's no real living thing in there, and anything that they do achieve and any proficiency that they do have, it is not at all worth the cost. The cost to anybody else, the cost to themselves. But the thing is, they don't even know what they're sacrificing on a day-to-day basis to continue the false construct. Now, that's that when it comes to the actual psychopath and actual like sociopath, and instead of the secondary sociopath, I don't know what the fuck's going on there, but they're very rare. The majority of people that have these cluster B disorders, it's more of a secondary psychopathy. There is like a human being in there. It's just very underdeveloped, and it has this kind of Faustian bargain of a offensively defense mechanism, which is defending them against things that they don't need to be defended against for the most part. It's defending them against things that could help them. It's just so backwards. And no, I just, and the thing is, anybody with a cluster B personality disorder, especially any more high functioning one, they're automatically just drawn to anything that has influence, anything that they perceive as power. Well, they're just going to flock to it like moths to a flame. And, I think the inoculation to this is it's information and awareness, and the sharing of experiences is also part of the antivirus. A friend of mine stated that she just sent me this message one day that said, sharing experiences is the antivirus. And I was like, damn fucking A. I couldn't agree more. This is my friend, Special Agent Luna. She's been on the show a couple times, or once so far. Once that we've put a video to. She's had some very interesting things to say about all this. If anybody wants to check that out, that's a video I believe called "Toxic Positivity," and she's on the latter half of that video.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, but that's interesting. Linguist said quite a few of them are serial killers, which is
that too.
which is true. And just I know it's a pop culture sensation right now. The Dahmer series out on Netflix. So how many people are you guys watching that? You can tell us if you're watching that in chat. We could always discuss that. I've started watching a little bit, and I think that's interesting too, because that's been the aspect of some of of like a fascination with people who have those disorders and the horrible things they do. For me, it's not so much a fascination with like the evil of it, but what is the causation of it? How does someone,
that's mine. Although, when it comes to people who get fascinated within that stuff, my first thought is, okay, to me, that's you've got a shadow aspect that needs to be integrated, explored and integrated. It's the unconscious latching onto anything it can to try to get somebody's attention. It's one of the reasons that we like villains in movies so much, like Darth Vader. Why? Because a part of us is projecting itself into that dark mask. Because it's a part of us that usually has a lot of power. Now, when that power gets integrated into the more holistic system, well, it's still power, but instead of this Machiavellianism on a galactic scale, in the case of Star Wars, it's more like Dumbledore and Harry Potter. The ocean of power with a very gentle touch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, with a good villain, there always has to be a little bit of a twisted truth there.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly.
You have to identify with the villain to a certain extent.
Yeah. And like one of the things that's fascinating about the Dahmer case is he just spilled the beans on himself as soon as he was caught. But somebody like Gacy just lied through his teeth until the very end.
Mm-hmm.
But Dahmer was unusual because he did seem like he had some form of empathy or something. Mm-hmm. And he didn't want his victims to suffer or something for the most part as well. This was another thing. And it's a fascinating case. And his apology that he read when he was sentenced as well. I remember I watched that recently, and it seems very authentic. And that's not to say I can always tell, but I've had enough experience kind of with people who are pathological liars. There's this honesty to him, and it's just so strange. That guy is an enigma. It's a lot more cut and dry with someone like Ted Bundy or Gacy. These are, they're all monsters, obviously.
They're all people from Wisconsin. Sorry,
I didn't know that.
You can add Geen. You can add Geen in there too. So Dahmer, Gacy, and Geen, all from Wisconsin. What in the hell's in the drinking water in Wisconsin?
Yeah. Well, in Dahmer's case, it was one. You see his family background. It's like, okay, that's one of those cases where a monster was kind of made in so many ways. Yeah. The mother clearly had some form of histrionic personality disorder, which is a cluster B thing. And most likely BPD as well. Or BPD was just very histrionic. And the dad seemed to be doing the best he can. I think that was the only kind of human tether he had. And then the mother being on all kinds of drugs and stuff whilst pregnant, I'm sure that didn't help either.
No.
Yeah.
And it was a concoction, but I don't think in his case he was just most likely more of an extreme secondary psychopath, a very extreme secondary psychopathy. But
there were times he actually tried to.
But for what it's worth, from my perspective, it's just a very interesting case.
Yeah, there were times it seems like Dahmer actually tried to come out about things like with his father.
Yeah,
because he knew what he was doing was wrong, and nobody would listen to him. Right. He was almost trying to out himself about it, about what he was doing, and like no one cared, which was the reason he was the way he was to begin with.
Yeah. And he absolutely did have some of that, what I would call zombie black magic, which is this kind of, they have this like almost vampire-like glamour effect where they can just kind of easily wash over a situation. Like the amount of times when people would smell death in his apartment and the kind of nonchalant bullshit things he would come up with, and people would be like, he'd be like, oh, you know, it's just the bad meat, you know, the fridge is Brits again.
Yeah.
And you know, my tropical fish died, and I, you know, bobbing up and down in there for a while, and then like, okay, but Jeff, the smell, like, yeah, you know, I'll probably get the carpet cleaned sometime tomorrow, or but you have a good day, like, okay, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this kept working, you know. It's just, and this is something that I've found, and many people who've experienced entanglements with these kinds of people, they do have this kind of vampiric-like glamour effect. That's very strange. And there is, in my experience, there is this very extra natural phenomenon when it comes to these kinds of people. And in my experience, this is one of the most potent things, which is one of the things I'd like to kind of help illuminate over time and help put those concepts out there, while some other folks are doing the same as well. Because, you know, the more you know, you know, it'll help with the disentangling and, well, the no contact thing.
Yeah.
I say reluctantly because it's unfortunate, but there's just, unfortunately, there's no other uniquely viable alternative.
So going back to the narcissist specifically, and now, you know, bringing up what you were just discussing again about having to eliminate contact. I know you were talking earlier about, you know, a lot of the best information that's been, you know, kind of extracted from this illness or disorder or whatever it's considered. That's the best way to deal with it. But is there for those people, has there been any cases of like coming back from it, from medication or psychological treatment that is able to
medication
help, or
medication can help temporarily to alleviate symptoms whilst getting treatment. But as it turns out, borderlines can recover fully. It takes a lot, but they can do it. And I'm also of the opinion that, I don't know, there's a fair amount of shamanic-y type things that if these things were taken into the whole treatment consideration, well, the treatment might go a lot smoother and perhaps more expedited. But there are very valid and viable treatments available for borderlines. Narcissists, it depends. But even they, if they get treatment, can live substantially better lives than they have been, because they're, at the end of the day, they're suffering at the core for the way that they're being, you know, just as much, if not more, than anybody that they're putting through it. But one of the things of the Faustian bargain is they really have no idea what they're sacrificing every single moment of the day by fueling this construct. And yeah, it would probably be a nightmare for them to confront their shit, but you know, pain, suffering, what was it saying? Suffering is optional, but pain is not.
Yeah,
and,
linguists.
By denying things continuously, it's just prolonging suffering and pain at the same time. So, but yeah, there are treatments available, and they do work.
Yeah.
And there are self-aware narcissists now who relay a lot of information, like on TikTok and YouTube, and are doing a lot of good and basically detailing how they are, how they've been, what they've done. It's really something. Not long ago, this was considered impossible. It would never happen, and yet it has. So So some good signs from that there. Linguist said there's a video on YouTube I watched a few days ago. Essentially, it looks like the video was people like watching, like looking at pictures of like Dahmer and other serial killers, and then they would sprinkle in other photos of like people who were not, that were like generally good people. And the people looking at the photos
perceive that they would, then they were asked like who they would want to talk to and stuff, and they were predominantly picking the people who are serial killers.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there's something to that, zombie black magic kind of
Oh yeah, well, like,
attractiveness
going on. There were just these countless girls and women that were just enthralled with him. They'd show up in the courtroom every day, and then they'd be asked questions like, "Why do you keep coming here?" Like, I don't know, I'm in love with him. Like, you realize he's in court for brutally murdering women. I don't know. And he had a very refined version of the zombie black magic, and rumor has it in one of his confessions that apparently the device errored or something, but he said that he was, and I quote, a vampire. And at times, these people who are more self-aware will kind of admit, I happen to know one who referred to herself as a werewolf and a zombie. And the last time we saw each other, which I thought, considering how things have gone, that I thought, oh, okay, I guess she's finally willing to start opening up about these things. Because in spite of how she is and what she's been, this person meant a great deal to me. And but no, she didn't. She let a few weird things slip like that. Like she said that she thought that she was, and I quote, like a zombie. And apparently she had some profound spiritual experience. And the letter to me prior was that was the closest she thought that someone like her was capable of getting to God. And it wasn't a good experience, apparently. I asked her about this. And she said, it was like seeing Odin or something. And I was like, what else? She's like, I don't want to talk about it. Okay. Guess that's the end of that conversation.
Yeah.
And it was. And, then she kind of went back to the zombie black magic shit. Just kept trying to sweep everything under the rug and wrote me back into the system and all this crap. And I was just like, okay, this was kind of her last chance. And I didn't have it in me to do anymore. It was, just being involved with her was just absolutely destroying my life from the inside out. But nevertheless, profound connection with this person on some level or something like that. It was as if life itself conspired to make us cross paths many times throughout my life. And we grew up down the road from each other, went to the same high school and things like this. And it's very strange. There was a lot of strange spiritual stuff, and I did have a lot of very spiritual development because of my involvement with this person. Anyway, it's just so bizarre.
Well,
and I don't know if it's common for them to open up about these things. I think that I don't think so. I don't know why she did, but she was fairly candid about things like this with me from the get-go. And that eventually, I stopped giving the benefit of the doubt, and I was like, okay, I need to admit to myself what I'm dealing with here. And that was that. So, yeah.
Well, maybe one of the reasons why you had to go through all that is so that you could share this knowledge with the world and start helping to change it in some better way.
Yeah, it's something. It's a very complicated situation. It's taken a lot to understand and come to terms with it. But anyway, it's been something.
And we didn't really get in it. We talked very briefly at the beginning about how these the relationships they can have with these people. And a lot of people in chat in the very beginning tonight were talking about what it's like for children who whose parents are narcissists.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah, I can only imagine, because you don't have that power to disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have that power to eliminate them from your lives,
And it tends to make narcissistic offspring or very exceedingly empathic ones, which have a lot of developmental traumas that they'll have to work through later on, and usually a lot of susceptibility to being involved with very narcissistic people, or there's just the straight up narcissists.
Yep.
One thing when it comes to narcissistic parents is they cannot abide by their offspring self-actualizing. So they will, in all these roundabout ways, they will just groom the child to self-destruct and force them to remain in this artificial state of dependency on the parent, while the parent berates them for this at the same time. And it's just the most convoluted shit you can possibly imagine. And it's criminal, in my opinion. Coercive control is now illegal in England, if I remember correctly. It's actually like considered a crime. So this is good. I'm not sure what good that does, but at least it's known enough to where, to me, this isn't something, I'm not sure if regulating it in that way is the best thing. I think it's something that probably is best addressed more organically, but I don't know. I really don't know.
So what did they make illegal?
Coercive control. So basically, coercive control is narcissistic abuse.
Okay.
It's one of the primary forms of it, and coercive control is it's so many different things. It's stomping a person out covertly, usually. It gets so confusing because you'll have someone who appears as if they have your best interest at heart, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And but they're just breaking you down. And for some people just don't know any better because it's all they've ever known. So they're stuck in these systems, and they're suffering from a shitload of physical ailments and psychological ailments, and it might get to the point where they start realizing, oh my God, it's all because of 24-hour a day, every day, psychological, emotional, empathic, spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
Because that will do all these things. Mm-hmm. And the other side of the equation is I thought it would be incentive for narcissistic people to do some kind of the version of the work for themselves, because by being narcissistic, they're abusing themselves, they're abusing their brains, their biology, and this also causes all kinds of illnesses for them over time as well. But can't be bothered with information like this stuff. What are you going to do?
All right. Well, I just want to put out there to chat. We're probably getting close to the end here. So if anybody has any questions tonight, throw them in there. We can get those answered. Coming up on the 30th, All Hallows Eve, we will be having RVA Paranormal back on, and they are gathering up some of their best EVPs. So get ready for some ghost adventures and some EVPs for the Halloween season coming up. We got that coming up. And of course, tomorrow night we have the Medium stream with Medium Jenny Lee. So I'm sure I'll see many of you all there tomorrow for some medium and tarot readings.
For sure.
Linguist said, I'm just going to hope for more of these kinds of episodes.
Yeehaw.
Well, I'm sure we have even more we can delve into, V, and I'm sure as you keep popping out more videos over there on YouTube, they'll have some other stuff that you might want to come discuss. So,
yeah, there's a backlog of content at the moment. So,
yeah. So, I think this was a different conversation than we've had so far. But like I said, this show, there's not anything really off the table on here. I try not to get too political, but other than that, if it like I said before, if this is a conversation you can have late at night with some close friends and maybe a whiskey bottle that's on the too close to empty, those kind of conversations, that's what we're willing to have, and I think that tonight fits the bill.
But I just had tea and water.
Enjoyed.
But you didn't tell me there was supposed to be whiskey.
I just had coffee. So
I had a juice. That's how I was partying over
here. Linguist says it's his paranormals talking about witches. Seriously, yeah, I think so.
We talked about zombies and vampires, werewolves,
and vampires, and zombie magic, and all kinds of things.
I think those are very useful archetypes because there's something to it in reality. That's the thing. And there's something beyond. I mean, that's what I'm calling extranatural phenomena. That's another word for that is paranormal. But I think of it as extra natural because for me it's more connected, and I don't know, it's something I'm perceiving, and it just helps to kind of ground it and conceptualize it a little bit more.
Have you been able to catch any of and I don't know if you have or not, but Medium Jenny Lee has like a series on her YouTube about Raw and like this channeling.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so I think there were some connections kind of being drawn tonight from some of that stuff as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I was made aware of the raw material about 10 years ago, and I got into some of it, but I'd completely forgotten about it. And then as I was watching and listening to some of Jenny's videos, I was like, well, Jesus, this sounds awfully similar.
Yeah.
Some of it sounds awfully similar to some things that, I don't know.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is it's, myself and a number of others have kind of, well, I guarantee you many of them didn't know about the raw material, but the thing is, it's just a certain point of actualizing where you just kind of, I suppose you're more in tune with a more innate understanding of things. Now, ideally, it's very good to test this. And that's another thing what I mean by the inner detective. And it's an interesting dynamic with that one.
Yeah, you have to turn your bullshit meter on and figure out what's right for you and what isn't right for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep, there you go. That's a terrific way of describing it.
Yeah.
There you go.
You've got the inner detective, and I've got the bullshit meter.
Right, and it's essentially it. It's
the same thing.
Like in my case, I had to gently cultivate mine because I went too far with the scrutiny to the point where it was actually kind of abusive, and paradoxically, it distorted lenses that I had that were actually quite functional. So I had to actually get a lot gentler with myself as far as the bullshit meter and then the cultivating. That's why I like to say kind of cultivating the inner detective, because it's kind of like a garden. It's like gardening. You don't want to beat the plant up, and you don't want a bunch of weeds to grow around and go, oh, well, that's the plant now. So it's it's using the intuition and learning yourself more. And because there's so many things that we're invalidated about that as we're growing up that we're told to tune out of, but really you need to tune into and develop more. And these things just go woefully underdeveloped, and they need to be developed.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it, in doing so, it helps significantly with so many things. So
for me, it's just like what feels right.
That's what I'm referring to, and that's what I mean my intuition. You got to cultivate that too. But we also, some of us have to clean up our feelings. Some of us have kind of fucked up in.
And some people aren't connected to their feelings at all, which is exactly what we've been talking about all night.
Right. They're missing out on a lot. It's like not using a massive portion of your data processing, perspective, understanding. And they'd have to, if they're that tuned out, it's not going to be fun to clean that up. But it will come with a lot of relief. And then it just might start being kind of fun a little bit after. Yeah.
Then comes the magical part.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's so magical.
It is.
Yes, it is.
I was going to bring up something else, but I think you guys just kind of ended it on a good note. So let's end on a high note instead of me bringing up something negative again.
We can bring up something good.
Yeah, we will talk about that next time if you're willing to come back on again for another episode down the road.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate you coming on the show a ton. Thank you so much. And everyone, please go check out the Environomicon. We have the links in chat here over on YouTube, and we will keep in touch. Thank you, everyone in chat, for coming in tonight. Thanks for hanging out. I'm glad that you enjoyed and hope you enjoyed another episode. What episode is this?
I was going to say, the interesting thing about this is that it's the 13th episode, and it's the 13th.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I
just wanted to say as well, thank you both for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
And as I said, on the 30th, we have essentially the 1-year anniversary of the Witching Hours. Our first show was the Halloween special, and we will be having another Halloween special. So the 1-year anniversary on the 14th episode, RVA Paranormal. Check us out. Then hope to see most of you all tomorrow once again for the Friday night stream.
Yes.
Just the title, the Friday night stream.
Friday night reading night.
Tonight was usually the rune readings on my channel, so I don't know. Maybe I'll find a makeup this weekend to pull my rune bag out and do some runes or something.
Jangle your bag.
Yes.
Jingle my bag. Yes. Never mind, I'll leave that alone. Okay. All right. So everyone have a good night.
Yep. We'll see.